So history was made that night because
Yes.
NHL sang the Canadian Anthem
Yes.
in Punjabi. How did that come about? Let's talk about that for a second.
Okay, welcome to the Cha Shack, episode number 6.
5.
Number 5. I'm
Just
your
forgot
host.
that.
I'm your host, Harsurman Sandhu, along with Mohabbat.
Hello, Sat Sri Akal, ki hal chal?
So today we have a very cool episode. Today we have in our studio Punjabi Community Health Services.
Yes.
Punjabi Community Health Services was Manitoba chapter was founded in August of 2022. So we also have Dr. Sandhu, who's been with us for a few episodes now.
Yeah, Sat Sri
Yeah.
Akal Sadhana.
She's just a part of the show now.
She's a part of the show now.
She's it.
And bringing on the founder and the chair of the PCHS chapter in Manitoba, we have Mrs. Randeep Sidhu Saini.
Thank you.
So welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
yeah,
thank
thank
you
you
for
for having
coming.
me. And Sat Sri Akal Saranu.
So this is great. So obviously, just want to start off a little bit about how you got started with PCHS. And if you can give us a little bit of background on how it's been going so far for you.
Sure. So Punjabi Community Health Services started, like you said, last year in August. Although मेरे को idea आया सीगा because I was working in the community for community health programs.
Right.
So मैं छोटे बच्चों ਨਾਲ काम करदी ਸੀਗੀ, young families, parents. So in the last 10 years, ਉਹ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ shift ਹੋ ਗਿਆ because ਆਪਣੀ population Winnipeg ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, it's grown and it's expanded very quickly. So ਹੌਲੀ ਹੌਲੀ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ 10 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ mostly ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਆਪਣੇ family ਬਹੁਤ ਘੱਟ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਸੀ. But slowly, I would say close to almost half the families I was seeing were now Punjabi. And then a fairly big percentage of Filipino families. So ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਆਮ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਹਾਂ Canadian society, the typical Canadian family, ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ideology it was kind of disappearing. ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਪਣੀ average family ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ community health services ਵਾਸਤੇ, they were more coming from diverse backgrounds and diverse communities and people coming from a different culture and different backgrounds. So ਹੌਲੀ as I worked, I found that ਜੇ ਮੈਂ family ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੋਈ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੀ ਸੀਗੀ, ਕੋਈ strategy ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ recommendation ਦਿੰਦੀ ਸੀਗੀ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗਣ ਲੱਗ ਗਿਆ this family is not going to do what I want them to do. Right? You would just get to know the family. And because ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ culture ਸਮਝਦੀ ਸੀਗੀ, because I'm Punjabi obviously, and I know what our homes are like and what's happening in our homes, you just kind of know that, okay, I'm telling this family to do something, but are they actually able to do it?
Yeah.
Right? Do they have the capacity to do it? Do they have the time? Do they have the knowledge? And how serious are they taking what I'm saying? So little by little, I started to doubt my own skills when I'm, as a health professional, providing service, thinking am I really making a difference? Why am I even bothering? Because I know that there's all these barriers that stem because of our cultural differences.
Right.
That's going to make it hard. And then it made me think about all the Filipino families that I was seeing and all the other families that come from all different countries. And I was like, I never thought about it, but I'm probably not making a difference in their life as much either because, again, I'm not taking into account what is their cultural background or their beliefs or what do they think about these issues that I'm talking about.
Right.
And so that's kind of where it came about. And I saw a lot of children coming in that were really struggling. And it made me think of my own childhood.
Right.
And it made me think of things that I've been through in my life that, things that I think our generation tends to block out of their head. Right? Once you've made it, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤਰੱਕੀ ਕਰ ਲਈ, ਤੁਸੀਂ set ਹੋ ਗਏ, ਭੁੱਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ, how you got there and all the stuff that you had to go through, right? But that, in those moments, seeing these families struggle and seeing these children struggle, it really brought me back. And I thought these families need help. Some of the women really needed help. The children need so much help and so much more attention. And they've got, nothing's really changed. When I was young, if I needed help when I was 12, 13, I had nowhere to go. Right? It was kind of like, who do you phone? And apni community which what we do is ਆਪਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਸਿਆਣੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੂੰ phone ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, right? Anytime there's a family problem, anything going on, ਉਹ ਸਿਆਣੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੂੰ phone ਕਰ ਲਓ, ਸਮਝੌਤਾ ਕਰਾ ਦੂਗਾ, right? Easy fix, right? But that never worked, and I knew that because I lived through that, right? I lived through that trauma, I lived through family conflict, I lived through mental health issues, and just not knowing that I had nobody to call, and if I called the siana banda didn't really understand somebody in my family is dealing with mental health, has, something going on or whatnot, or how to address issues like alcoholism and the addiction issues that you talk about all the time, right? That were a part of my family.
Right.
But again, I had nowhere to call. And so it made me, when I'm seeing these kids, I was like, you still have nowhere to call.
Right.
Right? Like nothing has changed. We are now fast forward 20, 30 years. We all talk about mental health. We talk about addictions. We talk about all the stuff that's happening, but there's no actionable steps taken to actually make that difference. So that's where I started to kind of go online. And I was seeing a lot of children coming in who were on the spectrum with developmental disabilities and disorders. And I thought I need to find material that in Punjabi that they can read and they can learn from. And just trying to even look for those resources was really hard, and I had to search BC, I had to search Ontario. And even then there's not a lot out there that's been translated or made culturally appropriate or sensitive or delivered in a way that makes sense. Other than a few YouTube videos or, really simple stuff, there just isn't enough. And so that made me, again, come back to that whole idea of like, are we doing enough? And is our system doing enough? Is our healthcare system doing enough, right? Winnipeg, we've grown, the diversity has grown, but does the system in Manitoba, the healthcare system, the social services system, all of that, do they understand how much we've grown? And just even working, I'd hear coworkers make comments all the time, right? Like, oh, there's so many more children on the spectrum in this community or that community. And I'd be like, well, no, that's because there's just so many more people of that community, right? Like, so it's sort of like the whole system is a little bit oblivious to, at moments, I think, that there's this huge explosion happening. So in my search, just came across PCHS out of Ontario. Listened to a few of Balev Uncle, who's the real, not the real, but the original founder of PCHS in Ontario. Heard him speak, and just though ਗੱਲਾਂ ਸਮਝਾਉਂਦਾ ਸੀ in a very culturally sensitive manner, like it was very, very well done. And then I spoke to him a few times. Galbat kiti, like, look, this is the situation in Manitoba. And actually, originally Manitoba toya, when he immigrated, he came to Winnipeg. He came here first, and then he went to Toronto in I think early 70s. And so he's a social worker and been working for many years. And so he saw the explosion in our community happen in Ontario in the 90s and started this in the 90s, right? And now again, 30 years later, we're seeing it here. So it's time that we brought it here, and it's time that we, again, made some actual steps or take some actual steps to actually doing something that makes a difference. Great.
So it actually went from Ontario to then did it go west and then kind of go through Alberta? Is it?
I feel like it went west before it came back.
Yeah. So we're probably one of the last ones, to be honest, because Calgary's been open a little bit more than 10 years.
Okay.
Wow. And I think they have a staff, don't quote me, but we did speak to them a couple of times. I think over 20 members, staff members now that provide counseling and therapy and all of that. And they, it's interesting because they work a little bit differently than Ontario because it's all based on the community, right? And the need. And then also, how are you partnering with the healthcare community and the government and all of that kind of stuff, and what programs are offered and how do you kind of fill those gaps accordingly. So it's a slightly different but same idea, same mission, same goal is to provide more culturally appropriate and sensitive services that at the grassroots level that actually make a difference. So so I think they started, and then I want to say there's people like all over. There's Edmonton, there's Surrey, there's Montreal, I think Ottawa, that are all in talks and working with Balev Uncle on setting up all of those organizations. So I think we were like probably one of the last
I don't think there's
ones.
much on the East Coast because there's just not a lot of Punjabis.
I haven't heard of any though.
I haven't heard of any there either. I think it's really fascinating. Baldevji had such a vision in the 90s, and the way he speaks and his he has an energy that he brings to what he talks about because he's so passionate about working with Punjabis. And the most amazing thing I find with him, and not just Punjabis actually, he works with lots of different communities. And what I like about him is he's at the ground level. He goes into homes and he intervenes and he works with people. It's not like people necessarily, I have more of an office presence or a clinic presence. This man was and is in the community, in these homes, doing that work. And what he's created, I think, is just phenomenal for communities to have access. What we're looking for is access, right? We want people to have, take away some of the stigma, especially with, substance use or other things that are stigmatized in our communities and bring that down, right?
Yeah.
So that to me is what he's created is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
And to have that in Manitoba now, based on what our communities are doing, like how our community has exploded, I think is great.
Yeah. And I think one of the interesting things he does is, like you said, he's created something really beautiful, is that he takes his approach to anybody needing help is very holistic. So often in healthcare, it's like if you have a problem, it's like they only work with you because you're the one with the problem. But he realizes that it's not the individual, it's the family who's got a problem, right? There's other issues at play. And so like you said, he'll be like, go get the rest of your family. And then he'll do an intake on the whole family, right? Wow. And so if a parent goes to him and says, my kid's not listening to me and won't get out of his room, he's not just dealing with a child who's possibly depressed and having anxiety or whatnot. He'll be like, okay, well, go get your husband, go get your other children, go get, if there's grandparents in the home, bring me the grandparents. Like, so that's the approach that's really needed. And so
and we've talked about that too, how the family has to get involved.
The family. And I love how bold he is. Some of the issues he talks about is just amazing. He just says it because people need to hear it. But there's so much taboo and just red tape we feel like is there. It happens to me in the community all the time. You just want to see the family, not just the person struggling with the substance. You want to see everybody, right? Because you got to know what's going on in the home. So I think in that sense he created a really good thing.
So I guess when ek saal ho gaya, almost like just over 1 year now. So how has it been in the first year since I guess it started here? How's it been for you?
It's been good. Like the first year was more about sort of getting established as an organization and figuring out our mission and our goals and our values and all of that kind of stuff. And so we managed to do that. And then it was also starting to explore funding opportunities, right? And then we developed a strategic plan. And from that, we kind of figured out, okay, where are we going to put the money first? Once we get some funding, what are we going to do first? And so what are the steps to actually getting established the way Uncle's established Ontario? Because obviously we can't go from 0 to 100 just like that, as much as we want to, and as much as we feel like we need that right away. It's sort of baby steps where you kind of have to prove every step of the way, like, see, there's a need, and you got to keep kind of building upon that to actually have that sort of secure foundation. So we managed to kind of complete our strategic plan. And then we noticed that when we started to engage with the community, we did a survey, and we had about, I think, close to 400 surveys completed. And we went to a few different community events like the Diwali Mela and the Punjabi sports tournaments that happen. And so people filled out what their priorities were. And so based on that, we developed our strategic plan. Okay, what do our communities need first? But also when we were out there doing these surveys, we were nowhere near offering any sort of service. We were just getting information. We started to get calls. Like people would be like, well, I need help right now. Right. And we're like, well, we're not set up, right? We're not operational yet. So we realized that there's sort of an immediate need to have a phone line where people can call right away. But the issues that they're calling with are so like diverse. So we couldn't like kind of just pick one and be like, okay, this is like just for addictions, or okay, this is for domestic, or this, we had to kind of remain a little bit open. So our first step was, just securing some funding, which we did through the Winnipeg Foundation. So they approved our funding just May of this year, and $50,000 for us to hire a system navigator and sort of a community outreach worker. So somebody that works in the community that's available for anybody to call for any type of help. So whether it's they have to go to the doctor and they don't understand why they're going to the doctor. They have to go for tests. They don't know why they're going for tests, right? Or they're having issues with their child, or they're having a domestic issue. Like it doesn't matter what it is, but they can call that person, and that person will help guide them into the system. Like, where do you need to go and how do you get? Because that's a barrier. Like families don't know where to go.
Oh, it's huge.
They don't know where to go or what to do or even what to ask for. And sometimes they don't even know that they're struggling with something. So that's the other issue. They just know something's wrong and they just want to talk to somebody. And that's okay too, right? They can call them and say, this is what I'm doing. Or this is what I'm dealing with. I don't know what to do. And he'll help them figure out, okay, well, sounds like you might need some counseling. Sounds like you might need this. Sounds like that. So that's sort of his role right now. And so he started taking calls in October. Yeah, so our phone line is busy, and he's getting busier. Like there's some days where he's like, I got 3-4 new calls today, and that's a lot.
So then he takes the call, then he pushes it to the appropriate specialist or the
He puts them on the right path. He'll accompany them to appointments if need be. So he's done that, and then he's brought the whole family in, right? So if he's got a call about a child, like he's actually talked to the parents as well, talked to the sibling as well, kind of helped navigate all of that together.
Very interesting.
And his background again, remind me?
He's a social worker.
Social worker.
Yeah, with 15 years of experience, And
he's been a community counselor as well.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. He's a community counselor, and he has a small private practice that
Yes.
he actually does do one-on-one counseling in.
Yes. Yeah.
And that might be a little bit of his role with PCHS later on. Well, depends on how we evolve and what the need is again. Yeah, and we're looking to expand that eventually, like depending on the finances and depending on continued funding and all of that support. Our goal is to hopefully have another social worker join him. So we can.
Is there a physical office too, or is it just right now just through the phone line? Is that kind of the main?
It is. It's the main way of contacting him. We don't really have a walk-in, like a storefront, but again, that's something that we're working on, and we're hopeful that maybe by this summer or early fall we'll be able to, or next summer and early fall we'll be able to have that.
Do other provinces have that, like a physical office?
Yes, yes, very much so. Yeah, we definitely do need it.
Right.
Again, it's just about
funding.
Yeah.
When you,
What I'm just was going to ask, and what are some of what you guys are doing right now, like projects that are, or you might want to ask some, this could be a longer.
Yeah, no, exactly what I was going to ask is what's going
what's
on
more
right
active right now in terms of what you guys are doing or even seeing?
Like in terms of what he's seeing?
Or even what are the projects that are sort of more on the table? Like you guys just did the South Asian, or you were part of the South Asian Heritage Night.
Yeah. So the South Asian Heritage Night, we helped kind of put that night together by being on that community advisory panel, and it's a great partnership, and that's sort of actually how we started everything. Was we were the recipients of the jersey auction that happened in February at the inaugural South Asian Heritage Night, and so they kind of really like what we're trying to do in the community, and a lot of the issues we're trying to address are universal, right? Like every community has these issues. It's just that we're trying to address it in a way that makes sense to our community, so that we can actually help our community the right way. So that's sort of how that started. And so then this year at the Jets Heritage Night, was that last weekend? I can't remember. 16th. Yeah. Everything's a blur because of Christmas. But so we were again the recipients of that jersey auction as well. And so that actually has given us quite a few funds that we're waiting to come in from True North. So that's going to help us, especially securing us hopefully an actual office space. So we did that. I think our goal for this year is really, we're going to reassess sort of how Roni's doing with his calls. Roni's the social worker, Roni Dhaliwal. So we'll kind of assess how busy he feels and what he thinks the needs are in terms of where he's at. I know he said to me many times, it'd be great to have a female counterpart.
Yes. Yeah. For those more sensitive issues.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think our goal is to have a female counselor or social worker, somebody working alongside him, and just to have that team approach together. We also want to do a lot more community engagement events. So a lot more getting into the community, and and it takes a lot of work and a lot of planning, but our hope is that this year we'll be able to do more of that.
You've had a couple parenting workshops. When Baldevji was here, I feel like you guys did some at a couple of different gurdwaras.
Yes. Yeah.
And how was that in terms of having parents from the community come out? Sometimes it's hard to just, like you said, in community engagement, it's hard to get these families or these adults, sort of, especially the ones that have that more ingrained way of thinking. Yeah. How do we get them to even just come out? Just to listen, Yeah.
That definitely has been the tricky part.
Right.
That's been very, very tricky. And we thought that by having them at a couple of different gurdwaras, we'd naturally get a little bit of an audience. And there definitely was a little bit of an audience. But you're right. It's not exactly like, you can fill a whole hall, right?
Yeah.
I think, and that's going to be a huge issue, I think, and just with what we're trying to do, period, is because, again, our community doesn't even understand that they need help.
They
don't even think these are issues.
Right.
Right? So it's like just getting them to buy in and be like, hey, no, that's an issue. Like they just think it's like nothing.
Could you give us an example? Yeah. Can you give us an example of what would be an issue that
they think is a non-issue? Is a non-issue.
It's like a cultural thing, right?
It's a cultural thing.
There's these things ingrained.
Is it a stigma, or what is it? I'm sure at some level,
for example, some people, I feel like, and this is just, me saying, I did a talk at one of the gurdwaras in the East, and this is years ago, about counseling and mental health and talking about your feelings. And I literally had 4 people there. Yeah. Because talking about our feelings is just not something we do culturally, right? Growing up, let's go back 30 years. We just don't. Yeah. These days, look at us. We're raising kids. We're encouraging feeling. We're encouraging, use your words, like all this stuff. That was unheard of growing up. Yeah. So then I had nobody sitting there because they were just like, where is she coming from? We don't do this in our homes. Yeah. So I'm breaking that ice, and people don't want the ice broken, especially an older generation. Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff that I experienced, right? Yeah.
I think also, I noticed in clinic when I work with the Indian families is they think that these problems Canadian problems, like Western problems, like you know, it's just that's just the way they are. Asita nahi idan de, like
Apna
culture different. Appa theek ha. Inna di problem hai gore idda kar de.
Mental health hondi ki hai, like who cares? Like somebody knows there's some mental health, I go to mental health.
Yeah, that's just right.
Yeah. So I think they project that like these are just their problems. They're not our problems, and so they don't take that advice. So even in clinic, when I work with families, and you know, a 4-year-old would come in or a 5-year-old with drinking milk out of a bottle, and they'd be like, they're not talking, or a soother. And I'm like, well, you might want to take that out, or you might want to stop, right? Or they'd be like, they don't eat anything. I'm like, but they drink 5 bottles of milk a day, right? So you try and give this advice, and they would just, you know, or you'd say like, they should be off the bottle in a year. And then they would look at you and they would be like, that's a Gora thing to say. Right? Like that's the response you get. Like, and I'd be like, nee, it's not a Gora thing. It's actually like a developmental thing. It's actually true. Yeah. So then I thought about it. If they go to a health professional who's not from the same community, and that person's giving them this advice, they're going home saying, oh, doctor, the Emmy bol dasya. Right? Like, oh, the
Dr. Aparna AC or something.
Exactly. Yeah. Or a lot of times I get families coming in and I'd be like, put your child in daycare because it's really antisocial behaviors and not developing right and just anxiety. And I'd be like, your child needs socialization, like two days a week even. Just get them somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. And they'd be like, oh, meri saas nahi mandi, meri maa nahi mandi, right? And then, so at first I wouldn't say anything. I'd be like all like professional.
That's a good situation.
Yeah. And then I finally just started to share my own experience. I was like, you know what? My mom and my mother-in-law didn't like it either, but I did it anyways, right? And that same mom would come back a month later and be like, I did it anyways.
Yeah.
You know, and so that was really powerful. I'd be like so excited because I'd be like, finally, you listen, you know, like that's amazing. But again, if you go to a health professional who's not from your background, who doesn't understand that, so they're going there and they're being told, put your child in daycare. They're going home going, of course they want us to kid in daycare. That's a Gora thing. Yeah, exactly. Oh, the bache rakhde nahi gaye, oh, the jaan ke nahi rakhde, like all this.
Yeah, you know? It's really funny.
Yeah, because going to daycare, I'm like, mere jawak hai nahi, but like going to daycare, that helps them socialize, right? And you meet other kids.
It's developmentally important. But you know, here's what's interesting. Back in the day, like us, we had 5 people from India who raised us, and we didn't go anywhere till kindergarten. Literally, like we had 2 BGs, right? Like a dadi, a nani, a nana, a mama, and a pua. There were 5 people in the home, and our parents are both at work, and there were 4 of us running around. Yeah. And so, I mean, affordability of childcare, it was all very different back then. Sure. But it's interesting because that same family structure dynamic isn't as much what we're seeing anymore. Like you have these immigrant sassa and mama and these, you know, aare ne pichon, but jede idhar de young adults ne jinna de nyane a, they're more interested in that integration into the culture much sooner than waiting till they're 4 or 5 like us.
But is it also because like back then the jawak families jawak bhi jada on this, you know, like you guys were 4 of them.
That's another thing, right?
So now family with more kids.
Like now people are 1 or 2 kids max.
Yeah.
Because look at the cost of living and the cost of having a kid.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the same as before.
No.
It's starting to come into our apne culture bhi aan lag gaya hai ki
of course.
1-2 bacche karne bas. Right? Back
it's
home,
rare to see the 4 kids.
No, you don't see 3 maybe, right? Like you just don't see it as much anymore.
My mom has 5 older brothers, 4 older sisters. Like that's a big family.
That's a big family.
No, you know, like that's a big family. But back home, that's normal.
Yeah.
You're not with kids all around, right?
No.
So, okay, so let's get back to that. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's a big one. I think that's a big issue.
Yeah, I think the other big issue is like the screen time. Like, you know, if there's kids back in the day when we grew up, there was no screens. You didn't really watch TV that much. So you occupied yourself and you still developed skills or you played with the neighbors, right? So you got your socialization piece in. But now it's like you're hitting the isolated families, the less kids, and just a lot of screen time. So
and I feel like with screen time, like you were saying the thing about the soother bottle, like diet. I find in our families, like there's no control over the diet. No. Oh, she eats too much sugar. Well, you're offering it.
Yeah.
You know, you want her to have a tantrum a couple of times, him or her, and then or wean them off the sugar. That is painful.
Yeah.
Weaning a toddler off sugar is painful. Just don't start it. But you know, it's explaining it to them. Then they think they're like, oh, tusi biscuit nahi dinde? And it's like, not really. Because then if she eats cookies and chips all day, she's not going to have dinner.
Yeah.
And then she has an iron deficiency and you're wondering why. So again, that's part of the counseling with these families, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Interesting. So can you bring it back to PCHS? What is the main, like, just explain in simple terms, which
Yeah.
what is the main goal?
So our main goal is to basically take programs that are already offered
Okay.
and kind of improve them or change them so that we can actually apply them to our community. So as an example, like one of our public health nurses on our board, she proposed having a parent-child drop-in group at a local gurdwara.
Oh.
Right? To her workplace. And they explored it a little bit, but then it ended up, there's red tape, right? It's like, well, if we do it there, then we got to do it at a mosque, then we got to do it at a church, then we got to do it here, then we got to do, so there's that red tape and that barrier there. So even though we know, hey, if we did it at the Gurdwara, we'll reach more people, we'll reach the capacity, right, of our community is there and we can reach them, you're not allowed to kind of go there and do that.
Why do you have to do it at a mosque and then at a church?
Meaning if we tailor our healthcare services for a specific group
like
to meet
Punjabi
their needs,
okay.
to meet their needs,
right.
then we have to tailor our services to meet the needs of all the other groups.
Okay.
But do they not have separate?
So it's not just for
groups?
Punjabis, it's more for...
So this is like the mainstream, like
Right.
our typical healthcare programs.
Yes.
Not talking about PCHS. I'm talking about like
Okay,
healthcare programs that already exist
Achha.
in government institutions, right?
Okay,
Social
okay.
services that exist in government institutions. So they're limited. Like they're told what you can and can't do because what they do has to be accessible to everybody,
Okay.
and it has to be the same for everybody in order to have equal service,
Well, of
right?
course.
But what happens there is if a community is lacking the capacity, such as our community doesn't understand that these are issues, doesn't understand that they need these programs, why they need them, that they should participate in them, then that community is not going to go into those programs, right? So for example, you can say, to somebody like, oh, if you need counseling, come to us for counseling. We'll counsel you here.
Right.
But if that person doesn't even know that they need counseling, they're never going to get there. So you have to go to them, and that's
go to them.
yeah. So that's so our hope is that we can create an organization that can offer similar programs, but without that red tape.
With the red tape.
Yeah. So we actually like, okay, that's where people are at. Let's go there.
Yeah.
We can, let's collaborate with the Gurdwaras. Let's collaborate with, different organizations, and let's work together and build that capacity of our community. And let's go to where they are at, and let's offer those programs there.
Fair.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
We're taking a break. That was great.
ਹਾਂਜੀ so welcome back ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ PCHS founder Manitoba chapter ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਥੋੜਾ let's bring it back a little bit, right? ਸਾਨੂੰ ਥੋੜਾ simple terms ਵਿੱਚ explain ਕਰੋਗੇ PCHS ਹੈ ਕੀ and what do you guys provide?
Okay. So PCHS, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਆਪਣੇ ਹੁਣ health and social services program ਮਿਲਦੇ ਆ through government organizations, ਉਹ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ cultural background ਆ ਉਹ consider ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੀ ਉਹ ਜਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਉਹ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ they're universal, right? So ਹਰੇਕ ਨੂੰ same program ਮਿਲਦਾ whether it's not done in a cultural framework ਵੀ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ background ਆ ਆਪਣੀ history ਆ ਆਪਣੀ family history ਆਪਣੀ culture ਆਪਣੀ traditions ਉਹ ਸਮਝ ਕੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ same program ਹਰੇਕ ਨੂੰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਉੱਦਾਂ ਹਰੇਕ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਹਰੇਕ ਵਾਸਤੇ is available but ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹ background ਨਹੀਂ understand ਕਰਦੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਇੰਨਾ effect ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ positive impact ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਉਸ family ਤੇ ਜਾਂ the person receiving healthcare services. So ਇਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ culturally competent, right? So ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੀ services ਆ like in Manitoba, they're not culturally competent. They don't understand the different cultures. They don't understand the different backgrounds. And so ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ program ਉਹ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ program adapt ਕਰਕੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ to suit the needs of the community. ਵੀ ਆਹ community ਆਹ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਆ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ ਫਿਰ ਇਹ understand ਕਰਨਗੇ ਪਰ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਗਏ, right? So ਸਾਡੀ like ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਆ like we're trying ਵੀ ਆਪਣੀ organization ਹੋਵੇ ਵੀ doesn't matter what community, right? ਹੁਣ PCHS Ontario ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਉਹ ਆਪਦੇ services ਹਰੇਕ ਨੂੰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ even Ukrainian refugees, Syrian refugees, like everybody, Chinese, right? Everybody. ਉਹਦੇ ਬਲਦੇਵ ਅੰਕਲ ਜੀ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਕਈ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਲੋਕੀ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, right? Different religions, different backgrounds, different languages. ਉਹ ਕੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਈ community whoever's coming for service ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੀ community ਆ ਉਹ ਆਪਦੀ service tailor ਕਰਦੇ ਆ to meet the needs, right? ਉਹ understand ਕਰਦੇ okay, you're from this background, this is what you believe in, this is how you believe in it. Okay, if I want to make you understand this, ਮੈਂ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਸਮਝਾਵਾਂ so that so you understand, right? So that's what we call culturally competent. ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਹੋਵੇ that no matter who comes to us for service, ਆਪਾਂ ਸੋਚ ਕੇ ਵੀ what's their background, what's their culture, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ family ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਆ, ਰਿਵਾਜ ਆ, whatever, and how can we change what we're doing so that ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝ ਲੱਗੇ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ. So that's I think I covered it.
So I mean, no, you did.
That's
So
great,
ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ like ਆਪਣੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਲਾ ਲਓ, ਸਿੰਪਲੀ ਜਿਸ ਆਪਾਂ ਐਕਸਪਲੇਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਜਦੋਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਫੈਮਲੀਜ਼ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਸਪੈਸੀਫਿਕਲੀ ਅਗਰ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਵੇਖੀਏ, ਬਟ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਤੇ ਅਪਲਾਈ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ, ਉਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਸ ਇਨਸਾਨ ਦਾ, ਉਸ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਦਾ ਪਿਛੋਕੜ ਪਤਾ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਕਿ ਉਹ ਪਿੱਛੋਂ ਕੀ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਕਿਹੜੀ ਬੋਲੀ 'ਚ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਸੋਚਾਂ ਕਿਹੋ ਜਿਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਉਹ ਸੋਚਾਂ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਬੋਲੀ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਤੌਰ ਤਰੀਕਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਪਿੱਛੋਂ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਆ, ਵੱਖਰਾ ਆ. ਸੋ ਜਦ ਤੱਕ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਸ ਵੱਖਰੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਆ, ਆਪਾਂ ਉਸ ਇਨਸਾਨ ਤੱਕ, ਉਸ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ. ਸੋ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਇਹ ਕੀ ਪੁਆਇੰਟ ਆ, ਰਾਈਟ?
ਸੋ I'll give you an example, like ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ, ਮੈਂ ਆਪਦੇ ਮੈਨੇਜਰ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਮੈਂ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੀ ਹਾਂ, my actual job, right? ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਮੈਂ ਆਹ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਹਾਂ, ਕਿ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ well why, like what's ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਕਾਹਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ, what makes your community, the South Asian community or the Punjabi community, so ਫਰਕ ਕੀ ਆ, right? ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ like there's big problems in our community, there's drugs, there's gangs, there's alcohol addiction, like lots of addiction, lots of domestic issues, ਤੇ family conflict, right? ਤੇ ਉਹ ਹੈਰਾਨ ਰਹਿ ਗਈ, ਕਹਿੰਦੀ what, like I didn't think, like ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਹੋ ਗਈ. ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ no, it's there, right? And it's very, very high. And ਕਹਿੰਦੀ no, I had no idea. So, right, ਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ I thought, she's very involved with different types of diverse communities, but I think ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਲੋਕੀ ਆਪਣੀ community ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ, especially people who are not from our community, ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲੇ ਘਰ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਕਾਰਾਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, we have all the materialistic stuff, right?
What problems could they possibly have?
Exactly. ਉਹ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਆਇਆ ਤੇ ਪੈਸਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਇਆ, ਘਰ ਵੀ ਲੈ ਲਏ, ਆ ਵੀ ਲੈ ਲਏ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਲੈ ਲਏ, ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਜੌਬਾਂ ਵੀ ਲਈ ਜਾਂਦੇ, right? So there's this misconception. But again, if you don't understand the history, ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ we come from British colonialism, right? ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ what our ancestors went through. ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ that alcoholism is there because of the immigrant struggle and all, there's multiple layers of it. ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ, ਪਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ. So ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ, ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ our community mostly we don't admit it. ਆਪਾਂ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੋਲ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, right? So I think it's interesting because ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ healthcare or social services, you see both sides. ਮੈਂ system ਦੇਖਦੀ ਹਾਂ, ਜੋ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ system ਆਪਣੀ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਨੂੰ understand ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦਾ. They don't understand. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਆਪਣੀ community ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਨੀਆਂ, like they're so high, right? ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਦੂਜੀ ਪਾਸੇ ਮੈਂ ਨੋਟ ਕਰਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ community, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਾਂ ਇੰਨੀਆਂ ਹਾਈ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਕੀ ਹੋਈ ਜਾਂਦਾ, right? So there's this major gap. There's a huge gap. And so when you're working and you're from that background, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੋਨੇ gap, ਦੋਨੇ side ਦੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, and it's very heartbreaking.
It's so heartbreaking.
It's very heartbreaking.
People used to ask me how I could have such especially people not from the Punjabi community, because that's the community I work with. ਉਹ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਤੂੰ private, like ਮੈਂ WRHA ਵਿੱਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੀ, it's all private. So they were like, ਚਲੋ WRHA ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ doctors addiction ਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਨਾਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ family practice ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, but ਤੂੰ family practice ਛੱਡ ਕੇ, which bulk of my practice, 90% now is addiction, ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਤੂੰ addiction ਵਾਲੀ ਦਾ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਜਾ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ, ਇੰਨਾ scope ਹੈਗਾ? And I'm like, because Punjabis struggle with substance use, and it is just shocking to people. They're like, what? And I'm like, their heroin use, the opium use, it's massive. And people just don't know.
No.
It's really interesting. I'm like, I almost feel like either I'm living in a bubble or other people are. Or again, there's just that stigma and that red tape, and our people don't talk about it. So how are other people supposed to know about it?
It's really weird. Like we talked about this during our break. Like I just mentioned how my husband, who's with the RCMP, sees the end result, right? And so I see these families, ਜਦੋਂ ਬੱਚੇ ਛੋਟੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ, that's when I see them, before it all begins, right? ਤੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਦੋਂ ਹੀ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਇਹ family ਨੂੰ struggle ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਕੋਈ issue ਹੈ, ਜੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਦੇ issue ਹੁਣੀ ਨਹੀਂ fix ਕੀਤੇ, ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਅਸਰ ਪੈਣਾ, right? And you see it. But ਉਹ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦਾ at the end, when everything is said and done, right? He sees the end. ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ believe ਨਾ ਕਰੋਗੇ ਵੀ 10 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ maybe ਸਾਲ, 1.5 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ phone ਆਉਂਦਾ ਆਪਣਿਆਂ ਦਾ, right? Like for translation, right? RCMP would call him and say, we need a Punjabi translator. Hon, it's like every 2 weeks, right? Every
it's
2
so
weeks.
Crazy.
And it's not just him. Like, my brother-in-law, he's parole and like corrections, and the numbers are just going through the roof, right? And whether it's attached to addiction or whether it's attached to like domestics, like there's just so much. And I think ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ like, I don't know why we don't know this stuff. But even like recently, a lot of the big, things that have happened in terms of criminal activity. Yeah. You won't believe here, even in Manitoba, it's happening. It's Punjabi.
So I said that point in, I think the first or the second episode we talked about that. The fact that like, apne log jode ne, they're turning out to be one of the biggest
both sides of the coin. They're the ones bringing it in, and then the use and
profiting off of it. And
of course, and it's really funny. It's like you said, the materialistic stuff's there. So you've got these homes, you've got these cars, you've got these fronts. Yeah. But what happens behind those closed doors? Yeah. We see it. Yeah. After. Yes. After the house is bought, after the cars are there, after the kids are born, and then it's like, oh my God. Yeah. And then things start to explode. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So it's an unfortunate cycle, and I think this is really important, what you said about, British colonialism and where Punjabis come from. Mm-hmm. Think about the land itself, the geography, the partition, what happened to this group of people. Mm-hmm. And I've done a lot of research on it. To understand substance use, I feel like we have to go back, right? To understand these individuals struggling, you have to understand why the struggle is there. Intergenerational trauma, where does it come from? Mm-hmm. So then you go back, and there's some wonderful people in the community that have done their master's theses on this work. So you sit there reading this and you look back and you look at the history of our people. So there's a reason for it. I'm not saying it justifies it, but there has to be a way to help these individuals work through that. Yeah. And there's power in that if you can get them to empower themselves to understand that and then move past it. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because there's many parallels between our community, and people don't want to admit it, but Indigenous community, right? And people don't want to talk about that. But when you actually line them up, just being the victims of colonialism, and like obviously there's differences. One might be more severe in other ways or whatnot, but the history is so similar, and then you kind of wonder why we actually are battling almost the same issues.
Same issues.
But again, we don't want to admit that because there's this pride thing in Punjabi people, right? We're just too proud.
About the ego.
Yeah. You guys talked about the ego. That's right. Yeah. Which was very good topic. Yeah.
It's a real thing, though.
It's a real thing.
It is. Nobody, koi ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ. No. Yeah. Nobody wants to talk about it ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਚਾਰ ਕੰਧ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਵੇ ਗੱਲ. ਜੇ ਬਾਹਰ ਚਲੇਗੀ ਲੋਕ ਕੀ ਸੋਚਣਗੇ? ਕਾਤੋਂ ਨਹੀਂ. But the people that ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਹੋ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ, they need those helps. They need people like PCHS, right, to reach out to, right, to guide them the right way. But ਲੋਕ ਕੀ ਸੋਚਣਗੇ? Right? And so that's why those barriers never get talked about.
That's why the barriers are there. It's like what you said, back in the day, ਆਪਾਂ ਸਿਆਣਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਫੋਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ, but the other side to the ਸਿਆਣਾ was how many people he or she told in the community. Yeah. It's like ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸੋ, ਬਾਅਦ ਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ help ਕਰਾਂਗੇ. Yeah. See? Yeah. And that is where I think we kind of screw up, because even with me, it was like, oh, what do you want to do? Ooh, addictions work? Like, ooh, do you want to help? Why? Yeah. It was I remember my dad and I talked about it, and he's like, oh yeah, but Punjabis and addicts. And I was like, well, they need help. Mm-hmm. Like somebody's got to do it. And somebody's got to do it that speaks the language, that can understand them. When they go to the RAM clinics downtown, they're not bad. Those doctors are doing their best, but they can't understand them. Yeah. They just want to give them their medicine and get them going, because the doctor isn't of that background to understand the crux of the issue. Yeah. But we grew up in those families.
We grew up in those, yeah.
So we have direct, firsthand, physical, mental, emotional experience of what these people have gone through, right? Except we just diverged and didn't go down that necessary path, right?
Yeah, yeah. So... Yeah, it's funny because like when Baladev Uncle Ji was here, he talked, his last talk that he had at Maples Collegiate, which was, I think, on the 17th, the day after the Jets game was. And it was really interesting because he talked about what is our frame of reference. So apne dimag vich, what are we comparing our situation to? What is our frame of reference, right? Te oh gal karda siga vi apni community di frame of reference it goes back to Punjab and India. Oh, apni frame of reference no matter what happens, apa sochde like loki ki kahange, that's a frame of reference, thinking back to the way life was in Punjab, right? Yeah. They already apni frame of reference. We have to change that frame of reference, right? So true. Yeah, and even like when I was younger, the मैं si siane nu phone karde sige. Well, I remember when I was 13, 14, they si siane nu phone kita. Te siana banda menu kenda, and to my parents, so di kudi bala bol diya. So then I got this reputation for just, bala bol diya, inu ki hoya, inu tusi chup krao, aime boliyan diya. And all I was doing was saying, look, we need family conflict like resolution. We need like counselors. We, but you end up getting this rep, right? Like this really bad image, and
because you're the outspoken. Yeah. You're being the outspoken child who's now creating a rift in that nice calm water.
So their frame of reference, their frame of reference was wrong, right? When they frame of reference said this is the right way. Their frame of reference just wasn't. Yeah.
But it's very true.
Do you find it difficult with, I think we talked about this on the break, where it's Punjabi Health Services, right? So has that been difficult to kind of get that message across to maybe other communities?
Other communities, yeah.
Maybe in Ontario and stuff, it's maybe a little bit different than it compared to here, maybe, or?
Yeah. I think there was hesitation about the name right from the beginning. Like, a couple of people said, well, why is that? If you're addressing cultural competency for a lot of different diverse communities, why is it just say Punjabi, right? But I think apan nu understand karna chahiye vi jehda ho like what do you call it, like a service delivery model, like the model of service delivery jehdi uncle ji ne create kiti the holistic model, right? So it's not just about the person, but puri family belonda. So jis hisab nal ho service dinda, it applies to many communities. So it doesn't just apply to us, but it applies to many communities. So it's important that we understand ਉਹਨੇ establish ਕੀਤਾ, ਪਰ ਉਹਨੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ establish ਆਪਣੀ community ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ. ਉਹਨੇ ਆਪਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਆਪਣੀ community ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ because he knew his own community, right? Yeah. So that's where he started in the 90s. But ਹੌਲੀ ਹੌਲੀ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗਿਆ, and like just in general, this actually applies to this community, this applies to an Asian community, this applies to, and now he's got Syrian refugees and Ukrainian refugees, because it applies to everybody.
Yeah. I think it's great that the name was kept, and then maybe just in different chapters, like, Manitoba is, but it's still PCHS.
It's still PCHS.
Well, I mean, that's,
I like that.
Yeah, and like, Uncle said it really well. He's like, it's just a name, right? Yeah. Like, at the end of the day, we have to understand it's just a name. Right? We should just focus on what we're doing.
Yeah. What are you doing at the ground level?
And I think holi even in Winnipeg, because apni jo diverse community will grow kar rahi hai, not just the Punjabi community, but all communities, right? Yeah. Actually, it's interesting because our social worker has one Somalian case already, and potentially a second one coming up. So, I think that it's going to be much bigger than our community. And so,
absolutely. I can see that happening.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think on break, we also were talking about the Gurdwara and how...
We should just start recording the breaks now.
Also on break.
Get a new battery. Get another battery.
Also another battery.
Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, the Gurdwara and how that's kind of been, like how that's, I guess, reaching out to them and how the feedback's been. Has it been like kind of standoffish or...
Like, is there resistance? I feel like there's, at least when I tried to do things just on my own as a single person walking into the Gurdwara and asking somebody to do lots of nervous, like, I don't think we can talk about alcohol use disorder after pot. Like, a lot of resistance to talk about those subjects, mental health, substance use, all the stuff that I do every day. Mm-hmm. If you want to talk about diabetes and stroke, sure. Mm-hmm. But the other stuff, not so much. Do you find that?
Stuff,
yeah. The hard stuff is
the hard stuff. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have found that.
And we've only gone into two Gurdwara sort of separately, so we haven't dived into sort of all of them.
Yeah.
So I can't really, sort of want to judge, right? But the turnout was okay. Sadi support in वैसे ज़्यादा करनी चाहिए. That I'll say.
Yes.
Right? Like, they should be supporting these things. Support, it's low, right?
Because the thing is कि साडी जेडी जनता like आपा बहुत belief वाले हैं, right? So गुरुद्वारियां दे विच the population जानी है, जिद्दां मर्जी कर लो. So अगर गुरुद्वारियां विच जानी है, फिर उथों ही तुसी attract कर सकते हैं, right?
Yeah.
So we do. That's a good platform. Changa hai.
Yes, platform बहुत चंगा. But again, like Uncle Ji was saying, your frame of reference, right?
Yeah.
So apne DJ frame of reference as religion and it's Gurdwara. So, but they have this version of what the Gurdwara is and religion is.
I know.
And if you try and tell them something different, like Jeo, कहते हैं अभी मैंने depression है, कहते हैं पाठ कर लो कोई ना सब कुछ ठीक होगा. Right?
Yes.
Shavdi problem, पाठ कर लो, you'll get rid of your addiction, right? Yeah, पाठ रख लो. But this is their frame of reference. So if you're going in totally opposite, like. you know, actually part de na so that, you know, problem sahi nahi honi, theek nahi honi, here's what you should be doing. Yeah, here's an actual evidence-based solution, right?
It's so funny, you know, ਘਰਾਂ 'ਚ ਕੋਈ ਡੋਮੈਸਟਿਕ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਘਰੇਲੂ ਮਾਮਲਾ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਨਾ ਤੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਪਾਠ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਰਖਾ ਲੈਣਗੇ ਸੁਖਮਨੀ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦਾ ਰਖਾ ਲਓ it's true ਆਪਾਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ
100%.
ਕਦੀ ਦਿਲੋਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਾਇਆ ਕਿ ਵੀ ਚਲੋ ਉਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਪਾਠ ਰਖਾ ਲਓ ਉਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਪਾਠ ਰਖਾ ਲਓ ਵੀਕਐਂਡ ਹੈ ਚਲੋ ਪਾਠ ਰਖਾ ਲਓ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਹੋਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਪਾਠ ਰਖਾ ਲਓ
yeah
and I mean some people do ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ but you're right I feel like ਜਦੋਂ conflict ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਉਦੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਧਰ ਭੱਜਦੇ ਹਾਂ but ਉਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਵਿੱਚ ਚਲੋ ਮੇਬੀ ਸ਼ਾਂਤੀ ਮਿਲਦੀ ਹੈ but ਉਹ resolve ਨਹੀਂ ਆ you're not going to get resources from that
no so I think that's a barrier ਜੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ their way of resolving it is different than what we're bringing to the table.
You know, it's funny I never thought about that frame of reference piece especially from the Gurdwara standpoint. So interesting.
Who do you guys generally reach out to in the Gurdwara? Is it the committee or I mean, again, you know, that I don't think you guys talk
No,
to
it's usually the committee.
The committee,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's usually doesn't include the Gyanis on there?
No, I don't think so. I don't know how they work.
I don't think the Gyanis, I mean,
you would know that. Like,
Gyanis didn't, I don't think they have any control.
They don't have
I
any
don't
say
think
that.
so.
It's the committee.
It's the committee.
The one or two I've talked to said committee na gal karo.
Yes.
So I think
they'll reference you to the committee because the Gyanis are just trying to do their own
they're
thing.
just employees.
They're just doing the
part.
They're in the
right.
part.
Party kar de, right?
Jithe menu, I think the where I find it a little bit personal wise is ਜਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ MP ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਉੱਥੇ ਸਪੀਚਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ okay
They love doing that.
because here's the thing
That's a big thing.
in every city ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਨੇ there's so many gurdwaras right ਸਾਰੀ community ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਹੈ on a Sunday for sure ਉੱਥੇ gather ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ right so there's no other place ਕਿ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹਾ ਮੈਸੇਜ ਹੁਣ PCHS ਦਾ ਮੈਸੇਜ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਤੇ ਜਦ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਲਾਉ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨ ਦੋਗੇ ਜਦ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ
Surprised they don't let you come up and just do like a little thing. You know when they do like
I think they allow it, like
and stuff like that when at the end. Do they still do
But
that?
they won't say no.
No, but there's just a little bit of I don't know.
People get up and leave?
Discomfort,
Or like not
resistance, or I don't know.
I feel like they could push a little bit more to get the word out.
Yes.
And like kind of get people to come. Like sell it more.
Sell it more. Yeah.
I think they allow you like okay, koi na kar lo.
And that's about it.
But then that same committee, they won't even sit there for the presentation.
yeah see
But they won't even do an announcement saying कि आ चीज होनी है बाद या अगले हफ्ते आ चीज होनी है there's not much they don't give it traction
No
so ਵੋਟਾਂ ਲਈ ਆ ਜਾਓ ਕੋਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਨਹੀਂ but ਜਬ actually ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰਨੀਆਂ ਨੇ then there's a problem
yeah
That'd be interesting to have. I mean, I'm just thinking like to actually have a conversation with a committee. I would like to see what their reasons are for not doing that. You know,
yeah.
Besides just being stubborn and just not wanting to do it, like
well, and
to
also
push
you have
them
to,
a little
I mean,
bit.
this
I
is a
don't know
whole
if
other
it's stubborn.
topic. Like stubborn or the fact that ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਜਨਤਾ ਘਟ ਗਈ, then at some point it's a little bit of not a business necessarily, but Gurdwara run off of a lot of different things, right? So if you have less sangat there, then it affects you in other ways, I guess, and maybe that's a piece of it too. Is feeling like, oh, we have, like with me especially, like, oh, we have that girl coming to talk, oh, she goes there, like. I have a bit of that, not image necessarily, but, you know, I talk about things that people don't like talking about.
Yeah, but
so then I become that person.
So I don't know if I got a chance to tell you this, but like, jab aap pehla episode kita si, the amount of response we got on the fact that like Punjabi de vich addiction nagi hai.
Yeah
People have these problems.
Yeah
There's that many, like 90% of them are male drug addicts. Like, what?
Yeah.
So many reached out, right? And not just to me, they reached out to my dad, who's well known in the community, and like man, like this conversation was good to listen to.
Yeah.
Right. So ਆਪਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ we got to break that stigma.
Yeah.
And I feel like ਅਗਰ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਨੀ ਸਟਰਗਲ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਸੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਾ ਹੈਲਪ ਕਰੀਏ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਡਿੱਗਦਾ that thing ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਡਿੱਗਿਆ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਲੱਤ ਕਿਉਂ ਮਾਰਨੀ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਚੱਕੋ ਹੈਨਾ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਆ I feel like ਹੁਣ ਹਰ ਘਰ 'ਚ like we had lots of substance use especially back home in Punjab ਹਰ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਕਿਸੇ ਦਾ like I always think about my chacha and his son so I always feel like ਕਿਸੇ like our chacha's son's name was Lali so ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੇ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਇੱਕ ਲਾਲੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਕਰਨਾਮ ਆ because those two guys are my heart so I always feel like I mean that's the biggest personal reason I got into substance use in our community is because I feel like behind those doors is someone's Lali and someone's Garnam Chacha. And if I could now go back and bring those two guys back, I mean, what could that be like? So I feel like that's where the passion is, right? Like you have a history and maybe it's our personal stories that want to bring these issues to the table for our people.
Yeah.
Saddi janta vaste. Appa ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਕੁਝ ਕਰੀਏ ਨਾ.
Yeah.
even if it means getting them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hai na?
Yeah.
And I think it comes back like with the Gurdwara, just bringing it back, like it's that lack of awareness. You were saying so many people message, right? Kinne ne message kite vi addiction hegi, sanu to pata nahi si, right?
Yeah.
I think at a certain level, jehde Gurdwara di committee vagera, that community, unna nu bhi nahi pata.
Yeah.
Je ਆਪਾਂ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਆ talk ਕਰਨੀ ਆ, they don't know. ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕਰ ਲਾ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ, right? So
Okay.
Can we talk about the Jets night a little bit? You want to talk about that a little bit? I thought it was cool.
I thought,
You
yeah.
want to do 5-10 minutes? Kar liye?
Yeah.
I got time.
Well, why don't we do 3 minutes?
Sure.
Take a little 5-minute break.
Okay.
So we recharge.
Okay. Okay,
Okay.
fine. We'll do a little bit and then we're done.
okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
And then call it.
actually, before we talk about the Jets night, let's
Yeah.
talk about PCHS's how like there's volunteers. Let's go into
Oh
that.
yeah,
a little bit.
let's talk a
right?
little bit about
So
that.
why don't
How to
we
contact.
go there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we'll talk
yeah.
about that.
Yeah, so we do have volunteers.
Are we recording right now? Okay, that's right.
All good. So now we have volunteers, and people have been signing up along the way. Like,
Yeah.
as we're out in the community, काफी support मिली है, काफी लोग की कहते हैं ऐसी volunteer करना, like put me down, right? We're hoping maybe like I hope that this year, if we're able to hire somebody else as well, like go from one social worker to another counselor, maybe we ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ peer volunteer program ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ. So peer volunteer meaning this ਜਿਹੜਾ social worker ਉਹ case ਲੈ ਲੂਗਾ, evaluate ਕਰ ਲੂਗਾ, and then he'll assign a volunteer sort of as a peer support, right? So ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਜੇ ਕੋਈ help ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ, to match somebody that understands their background and their history and has life experience to have that volunteer help that person. Yeah.
Great.
So
And what kind of different members are on the board right now? Because you have different occupation members. Right?
Yes, yeah,
So what
yeah.
kind of members can we talk about? Them a little?
It's a very diverse board.
Okay.
So and even our advisory panel, if you want to stretch it out a little bit, like we have like public health nurses, we have people who work in law enforcement, either as police officers or as parole, probation. We have like everything, like real estate agent, right? A couple of those. We have like a retired therapist, retired school therapist. Trying to think of nurses. Did I say nurses already? Yeah, nurses who work in different capacities. There's like 3 of them, so they're good. Trying to think again. Yeah, and just people with that background in working in healthcare and working in healthcare organizations. So like my vice chair, Rupinder Brar, tons of experience working with Indigenous communities and helping navigate Indigenous communities to get better healthcare. So, and he sat on the Seven Oaks board for 10 years.
Yes.
So just lots of experience working in the system, right? ਇਹ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ understand ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕ ਇਸ system ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, that's who we are,
Yeah.
right? So ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, but we need people in the system ਜਿਹੜੇ system understand ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ gaps understand ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, and then they understand how to change those gaps and what can we do to change them. So ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ, we're all in the system. Yeah, we're all frontline staff, Gado, right? We're working on the front lines. We're seeing the families. We're seeing the clients in our clinic. So,
And that's the best way, because then you know that these guys see the problems, the issues firsthand, right?
Yes.
And so it's better and a lot faster for you guys to help.
Yeah.
Right? A better way.
Donations and funding. How do people donate to PCHS, or can they?
Yeah. So on our website, there's a donate page. So if you just visit www.pchs.com or pchsmb.com, there's a little donate button at the top. So you can definitely donate there.
Perfect.
And then there is if you want to volunteer, I think you can just email us at info@pchsmb.com. So which also you can navigate through the website. And you can even send us a comment through the website. So if you want to volunteer, you can just, I want to volunteer, and I'll go into our email account. So
Perfect.
there's that as well.
And we'll put all this.
We'll put it.
right?
we'll put it on
So it's available.
It'll
for
be in the
people.
description, and
Yeah.
it'll be also on the screen as well.
Yeah. Good.
That way, you guys, the best way to get it out.
Best way to get it out.
For volunteers, like you said that right now you have a social worker, and you'll peer volunteer and all that.
Right.
But do you have like events coming up that you need volunteers for? Is that like, what kind of volunteers are you looking for?
Yeah, like usually when events get planned, I'll usually send out an email to all the volunteers just asking who would like to volunteer and what they're available for. And then we'll sort of coordinate sort of a schedule based on our events. Right now, I'm just trying to think, it's January. We are hoping to do something in April.
Okay.
Kind of have something in the works, but we need to really sit down and plan that and Kenny sits on our operations committee. So yeah, kind of need her
Preferably.
input on that as well.
Well, we're doing something in January. I saw an
Yeah,
email
yeah,
about that.
yeah.
There's something coming up.
Yeah, January 14th. So I
Yeah.
think that's going to be the big topic for us is what we're putting on in April. So we're hoping although Vasaki hundi hai, although many school
Yeah, I was
divisions,
just
Seven
going to
Oaks,
say, it's a good time.
do like really big assemblies, right? Job bunch so family hundi and mostly apniya family are now in the north end. So hoping to do something there. So again, apa gal kiti sige how to be in the community. Where is the community going to be?
Yeah.
So just taking into consideration that that's where the community is going to be around that time, and what can we do?
I feel like I need to have a table at one of these events one day. I mean, for me, it's been a bit of a time issue, but just sit there.
Yeah.
Feel like you can ask me questions.
Yeah. Open.
Yeah,
Open
you
mic.
know, because once they see your presence, right? I think that's what you guys obviously are trying to do, create that physical presence so people know we're there, right?
Yeah. And we're hoping I'm hoping that in April we're able to draw on the different experiences and professions of our board and our advisors because they come with a different lens, right? So just trying to bring those together hopefully in some way.
Good.
So we can do some more of that.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah. Let's take a 2 minute and then we'll get back and we'll have final few questions and then we'll call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so welcome back. We wanted to talk about the South Asian Heritage Night. So that was really cool to see. And how did, I guess, PCHS become involved in that, and who organized it? Who was the main organizer there with the Jets?
So the main organizer is True North Sports and Entertainment.
okay.
And what they did is in February, they tried to find contacts in the South Asian community in order to sort of plan this evening. So they got a hold of a couple of their season ticket holders.
Okay.
And so those season ticket holders, one of them being Ganiman, who's a good family friend, they reached out to him. And so they put together sort of a community I got to move up. So they put together sort of a community advisory panel.
Okay.
And so from there, they kind of started that initial planning for that first night that happened in February, which was the last hockey season. And PCHS, we kind of got involved, I would say, when most of the night was already planned. And at that point, you know, everything was sort of set already, the entertainment and the DJs and everything was sort of picked out. But how we got involved is we managed to have a sit-down meeting with True North, and, you know, they wanted to, again, build some strong connections in the South Asian community and actually contribute back to the community in some way. So it's a great organization where they really want to help communities, and they want it to be something very tangible, something that, you know, resonates and makes a difference. And so when we were able to kind of have a sit down, you know, very informal conversation with them, we told them, this is PCHS, this is what we're trying to do. And they're a very well-established organization. So they did their homework, right? They looked at PCHS Ontario, realized the long history, the fact that it's an accredited association, and it's done phenomenal work the last 20 years. And so right away they were just like, yeah, like we're going to support this. And we see the need, and we obviously see that the model worked in Ontario, so it's going to work here.
Yeah.
So from there, we managed to kind of formulate this relationship. And so then they offered to, help kind of get us going and provide some funds for us. And so they developed a logo, as we were talking on the break there, with a local artist and an organization called Ethnicity Matters. And so all the merchandise that has that logo on it, there's a portion of it that is donated to us. And then the Jets, at the February game, they wore the jerseys with the logo as a warm-up practice.
Oh.
And so those were auctioned off. And again, those proceeds will be coming to us. This year they didn't wear them on the ice, but they had them out, and they had some players sign them. So those were auctioned off. And so we'll get the proceeds from those as well. So this year we had a little bit more of involvement in planning. I think they wanted to kind of grow their advisory panel. And so they asked us to kind of sit on board to help them make those connections in our community.
Were there other communities part of the South Asian? Like, I know Punjabis were big.
Right.
But does any other fall under that, like for the South Asian Heritage Night? Or?
Yeah. You know what? That's a really good question. I'm actually really glad you asked me that.
Yeah.
Because originally, the one that happened in February that we didn't have much say in, I think there was a pretty heavy emphasis on the Punjabi. And for a fair reason, right? We are probably the largest South Asian population at this point in Manitoba.
Yeah.
And so I think the language and just everything, I think Punjabi is the third most spoken language now in Manitoba, right? And so those numbers are really climbing, and we're just like, I think, one behind Tagalog, right? The Filipino language.
Yes, I've seen
So in all fairness, that's why there's such a heavy representation of that Punjabi community. It's just logical. But this year we did try to expand that, and we really we requested that, you know, True North kind of expand that, and they did. They got involved with India School of Dance, which has been around, I think, since the 80s.
Yes.
So again, a very well-established organization in the South Asian community. And then also with the DJs, you know, DJ, we were just talking over the break there, DJ Hira, doing the Punjabi music. But then we got the West Indian community involved, because at the end of the day, they're sort of still South Asian, and so many similarities between the cultures and the groups and all of that. So we had DJ General B come out. We did some West Indian music and soca music. And then we had...
I love soca music.
Oh, love soca.
Yeah. So lots of crossover, right, between the two communities.
So great.
Yeah. And then DJ here also recommended the last DJ we had, DJ Nish, who does a lot of Bollywood Hindi
I've heard
mixes.
of that,
So it was nice. It was nice to kind of push for more inclusivity and get more diverse types of South Asian people out. And I think everyone appreciated it. Like, I think it went really well. Yeah.
So history was made that night because NHL sang the Canadian anthem in Punjabi. How do you guys feel about that? How did that come about? Let's talk about that for a second.
I don't know the details, to be quite honest, how it came about.
Okay.
So I won't pretend that I know. But just kind of found out that that's what was proposed. We did talk about, I know I was in the initial meetings where we did talk about a choir singing O Canada and having that choir, you know, come predominantly a South Asian focus. So that was talked about. But in terms of the anthem being translated, or parts of it being translated into Punjabi, you know, that was kind of thrown about afterwards.
Okay.
I think overall, like, I was a part of the puck drop, so I was on the ice when it was sung.
Nice.
And I think the response was overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
Lots of cheering, lots of, you know, just, it was good. Just being in that moment, I can say the response was great.
Yeah. Because it sounded really good.
Yeah.
Like,
I thought it was amazing. I mean,
even though thoda jab translate kita hoya si na,
Hanji.
it worked perfectly. The flow was perfectly, like, I listened to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it was really nice.
Yeah.
I think because आप बाद जो response देखा, but
there was some feedback.
and I want to get into that a little bit, but how was the overall turnout? अपनी community तो थे किन्ना को turnout सी जब game थे, you were there. How did you find there was a big community for Punjabis there?
Yeah, I think there was. I think it was a pretty good turnout. You know, and it was funny because you were saying that you didn't know about it till like almost last minute, right? Yeah. So I think we'll have to do a better job of getting into the community and doing some of the more of that outreach kind of advertising.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think, you know, we'll definitely take back to the table when we kind of debrief with True North about. But overall, there was a pretty good presence, I would say, of South Asian communities and South Asian families being out there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great.
That's good. The reason why I say it, because I think like important है क्योंकि जब हम True North थे अपने reach out किया, right? They reached out. They want to work with the South Asian community. They want to do all these things, but अपनी community में support करना पड़ना. Like, we gotta go, not just the South Asian Heritage Night,
Sure.
but again the Jets are like Winnipeg wise is our team.
Yes.
अपनी team है. And NHL has a huge presence in the Punjabi community. There is a huge, like, there's players that are Punjabi that play in the NHL, right? And so it's almost like field hockey.
Yeah.
Right. So we got to go to these games. We got to watch these games because I know that, like, we've never been able to take my parents, and like
The Jets game.
and I want to be able to take my parents to the game. So if we can take our girlfriends and our friends and to the Jets games, take your families to the Jets games.
Yeah.
Because, like, again, you got to
Because it's
support.
part of our community. Yeah.
It's a support.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Especially when they're going and singing along Punjabi, like,
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
a big
Canadian anthem
Yeah.
to change. So as an army guy, and the whole, you know, there's a stigma on, like, you can't mess with the national anthem
Yeah.
in
Yes.
any way.
Of
Yeah.
course.
So the national anthem nu to sidda, especially ek word भी change हो जाए, क्योंकि nobody would allow, like, India the national anthem nu ek word भी गलत कर दो ना, is a big problem.
Of course.
So obviously the Ethnic community hai, they felt it a little bit of as why अपनी Punjabi anthem chkatur hai, like Canadian anthem, why is being translated in Punjabi.
Yeah.
So I noticed it. The response from the other communities wasn't the greatest, right? But again, that's where it comes down to, like, we got to support Could be, you know, these guys are doing it, are going out of their way to reach out to us. We got to do the same. We got to extend that hand. And I think we got to start showing up to the games. And I'm sure people do, but there's got to be a better presence of it.
Yeah.
That's what I think personally.
Yeah.
That's a very good point because like True North, they also set up a tent next to us at the Punjabi Sports tournament
Okay.
over the summer. So they're definitely making an effort to be more present in our community. So, you know, that's a really good point because that is their goal. Their goal is to make those connections in our community and bridge the gap that does exist between the two communities, right? And ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਸੀਗੇ, your mom and dad never went to a game, right? That's the stuff we want to change because if we're Canadian, like yes, we're South Asian, but we're Canadian, and that's a part of Canadian life and Canadian leisure. Then we need to kind of be a part of that thread.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, good.
I think that's a lot.
a wrap.
Yeah, that's a wrap. Episode 5.
Episode 5. We'll
good.
put the
It was good.
links for PCHS,
Yes.
how to contact the organization, how to volunteer, how to donate. We'll put that on the bio.
On the description ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਵੀ ਲਿਖ ਦਾਂਗੇ ਤੇ screen ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਵੀ ਪਾ ਦਾਂਗੇ, ਠੀਕ ਹੈ? I do want to say that ਕਿ PCHS ਨਾਲ ਆਪਾਂ because today the episode C was just an overall introduction to PCHS, right?
ਆਪਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ
So
future ਚ।
over the future we want to be able to work because ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡਾ podcast ਦਾ goal ਹੈ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ PCHS ਦਾ goal ਹੈ was the same. It's to talk about these topics that aren't being talked about.
Yes.
Give people an outlet ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ, right? And PCHS is a great outlet.
Yes.
If you ever need any help in any way, that's why they're there. So we're going to be working with them as much as we can. Obviously, we'd love to have you here every time. So
Yes, for sure.
we're going to try to do as many episodes and possibly bring them on board, right? And so I think that's it for us.
Yeah.
Any
I
last
think-
remarks?
I think one thing is so people should also be sending us, you know, certain things if they want to hear about.
Yes.
Like message us or comment.
Yeah.
That
Topics.
helps in the content.
Things you want
too,
us to
right?
talk about.
Yeah.
So we did check the email. There is a few people have contacted, so that's awesome,
Oh,
right?
good.
So we've been reaching
We'll bring
out.
that up
There's
next time. Sure.
So message karo sanu, right? Email us. We'll put all that in the bottom, right? And let's talk.
Sure.
You know, let's get you on here. Let's talk more and get these conversations going.
Perfect.
Did you have any
Thank
last
you.
remarks?
No, just thank you guys for doing this
Yeah,
and
thanks
having
for
me
coming.
on, but also just starting the podcast and diving into these topics that are very much needed. So, like you said, our goals align. So thanks for doing this. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Right? Awesome.
Okay,
So we're going to cut it here.
We're out.
Have a good night.
Sat Sri Akal.
Sat Sri Akal.
Speak up.